Farewell to friends. Mr. John parked his car in front of the post office a long way from the forest, and Mr. John had intended to send a telegram to his cousin and only heir, asking him to come immediately to inherit him and to recommend him before he died. Mr. John was alone, and his wife died after a long life spent with her husband in that forest where we lived for 50 years. And Mr. John and his wife didn't have children. The purpose of the letter was also to find John to hide his body after his death. As soon as John finished sending the telegram, he walked out of the post office showing signs of fatigue, got into his car, turned on the engine, started moving, and didn't want the greeting that Mrs. Lynn, who used to greet him whenever he came to the city from his forest, known as John's Forest. John owned this vast forest after buying it at auction, and John remembers how he convinced his wife to live in it and stay away from the bustling city, and how hard it was for himself to overdo it. John reached his forest and drove into front of his simple house where he had lived for 50 years. John got out of his car, putting his hand on his chest, looking at the crowds of animals that used to rally around him whenever he returned from town. Really a strange scene for those who don't know the truth about the relationship between John and these crowds of animals that surround him, and of course live in his forest, and how John, when he owned this forest, refused to remove the primitive aspects of life in it, and did not expel the animals or get rid of them. John's story in this forest that he bought at auction began 50 years ago, when he advised his wife to buy this forest, and despite his wife's objection at first, she was happy when she saw her husband happy. How much he dreamed of owning such a forest. As soon as he signed the purchase contract, he moved to it and chose a place in the middle of the forest to build his simple house. And John starts building the house, and from moment to moment, he finds an animal or a group of different animals between a pet and a savage who comes to watch what happens. It's as if these animals are wondering what this human being is doing in our land, and John is going to house him internally and externally to live with his wife in it. One night, John hears a moaning and rushes out alone, carrying his lamp and rifle to find a cub whose mother seems to have died, and this cub is starving. And without thinking, John carries him home this harsh winter to feed him and cover him and make him feel warm. And from tonight on, this cub felt that John was his mother, and a relationship arose between them similar to that of a child with his mother. This friendly relationship between John and the cub was not limited to this limit, but extended to all the animals of the jungle, from lions, tigers, elephants, giraffes to squirrels, deer, zebras and monkeys of all kinds, all of whom were John's friends. John kept nostalgic for his friends, offering them food and water, especially in the rainy summer. The result of this good treatment was that the animals were closely associated with him, and one of the manifestations of this was that they waited for him when he got out of the house at any time, and they wiped him like a child wiped with his mother, and some of them came in front of him to be embraced by this good man. But this time, John came back tired and unable to breathe fully, and despite passing by the hospital and buying some medicines, the pain was able to do so, and it's not the first time he's had this pain that runs from his whole chest and heart to behind his left shoulder. John entered his house and left the door open so that if his cousin and relatives came in effortlessly. And the animals felt that their friend's time was about to come. So they entered the house and gathered around him around his bed, crying for this good man who lived with them and their parents his whole life, and none of them was raised on his hands, and how much John treated him if he got sick, and now they can't and don't have a life for him to save him. John was no less sad than them. He looked at them with a look full of sadness, and only God knew their future. Deadly questions run through his mind. Who will own the forest after him? Is he his cousin, that man known for his cruelty? And he started thinking, if his cousin owned the jungle, what would be the fate of these poor animals, and who would take care of them after his death? All these questions went through John's mind, and his tears flowed as he saw the sadness in the eyes of his friends, who felt that John was in his last moments. And a minute passed since that, and then John's eye was spotted upwards, and if with his good spirit he would ascend to the sky. It was a sad, dark night in which the animals remained around John's bed, hearing them moaning as if they were crying, but crying and screaming. As soon as the sun rose in the sky, he heard the sound of cars outside the house, noise and jogging, so John's cousin William came and his friends rushed into John's room and found him dead a few hours ago. Immediately, John's body was prepared and carried in a simple wooden coffin to the middle of the forest for burial, and then they changed their mind at the last minute that he should be buried at the last point outside the forest. And it was a strange scene at the burial ceremony, as those who were there were animals many times more than humans who were there saying goodbye to their friend and their affectionate father. After John's burial, everyone returned home. Some of them were busy preparing food and preparing bottles of wine, and those close to them were busy searching the house to find something valuable. Then they all sat at the table eating, drinking, and talking about what's to come. Zach, William's friend, a wealthy businessman, said, "Oh, how lucky it is when he comes to you kneeling, William. Here you are. You have inherited a vast land on which you can build whatever projects you want to live as a rich king." William: "Yes, you are right, and I will not forget you, my friend, how much you stood by me when I was borrowing money from you, and you will be my partner in this project. I'll be in it on the ground, and you're in the money." Zach: "Of course, my friend. I'm going to pump everything I have into this project." Third guest: "And we don't have luck in this division?" William: "Of course we will all get good, money and wealth." Another guest: "But what project are you going to build on this vast land?" Zach: "There's no more profit than trading in real estate." Guests: "Yes, yes, real estate."
William: "But first we have to remove all the primitives in this forest, and then evaluate on it what we want." Guest: "Yes, but how are we going to get rid of these annoying animals, Zach?" After thinking, "Kill her." William: "We kill all these animals." Zach: "Yes." Guest: "What do you think about sending to the zoo and then you come to hunt it and put it in the zoo instead of killing it?"
William: "But first we have to remove all the primitives in this forest and then evaluate what we want." Guest: "Yes, but how are we going to get rid of these annoying animals?" Zach, after thinking, kills her. William: "We kill all these animals." Zach: "Yes." Guest: "What do you think about sending it to the zoo and then you come to hunt it and put it in the zoo instead of killing it?" Zach: "This is time-consuming, and we don't have to wait months until an employee comes and the place is inspected, and then he forms a committee to hunt the animals, and then it takes another month to hunt. And we're not going to wait for all that. We kill animals, dispose of their bodies, and then start working immediately." Zach: "Here's who agrees with me. Everyone. We agree. Yes, we all agree." Zach: "Let's toast this giant project then. Their death is that some animals were eavesdropping on them and listening to their words in astonishment, anxiety, and anger." Meeting with the king. Immediately the news reached the rest of the animals, and their revolt erupted. They started threatening these intruders, and their voices were loud with screams, and they entered into a state of extreme anger. This anger was interrupted only by the roar of King Niban, king of the jungle, who broke his fangs to silence them, jumped from a rock into the midst of animals, and then began to speak after a period of terrible silence. Niban: "Oh, my friend, how kind and friendly you were to your friends. We thought that all humans were like you, but unfortunately we discovered that you were exceptional and that all human beings are fools, exploiters, greedy, and heartless. My friends, then we have to defend ourselves against these fools. They're going to try to kill us one after one in cold blood. They know no mercy and are occupied only by their pockets full of money and their stomachs full of food. One of the tigers: "How do we defend ourselves, boss? And are we going to wait for them to come out to us or surprise them?" Niban: "We're going to fight them just as they fight each other. We're going to make plans, and there's going to be hit and run, surprise, and traps. We're going to make them regret that they thought about our ears." Then the king sighed and said, "We must keep the elderly and children away from this war in the most remote and safest place. We also have to prepare all of us for war, and I'm the first of you. My friends, be patient, and none of you will move with an attack except by order of me." Then Naban looked at them, and they all said, "Agree." The morning of war. This morning, everyone woke up and had a light breakfast. Each with his rifle and bullet belt got into their cars and then penetrated into the forest. And it was a surprise to them. Where are the animals? They don't see any of them. Someone jokingly said, "Did they leave the forest in grief for their friend?" And another said, "I wish they would do enough for us to provide for the bullets that are wasted on them." They continued on foot after they got out of their cars. Maybe the sound of the car's engine alerted the animals. This time also they did not see a single animal, so they felt something of fear and anxiety, and a period of silence prevailed. Suddenly they heard a sound coming from the trees, and they all pointed their weapons at the source of the sound. But they saw two birds moving between the trees, and they understood that they were taking down their weapons. Their moment was not complete until one of them shouted with his extended hand, "Here they come on," and everyone rushed behind their friend, who rushed to what he saw. As soon as they arrived, they were shocked that it was a small wild pig that stood trembling from their gathering. One of the gunmen said, "Damn you! We thought you were a precious hunter." His word was not done until many coconut fruits and some stones fell on the heads of monkeys dropped by a group of monkeys. No one escaped from the strange gunmen, and everyone was injured in the head. And immediately they started firing their shots at the monkeys that disappeared away, and none of them was hurt badly. Then everyone began to wake up from their shock to find their foreheads stained with blood, and each of them tricked to wipe the blood from his head in amazement and extreme anger. It's as if each of them is telling his friend, "We've been deceived, and these aren't easy catches." Their thinking did not linger, and at lightning speed and without making a sound, 3 huge tigers rushed to attack them, planting their fangs and claws in the arms of the 3 of them, and then they ran away amid the stupor of strangers and the screams of the wounded. In vain, the uninjured tigers tried to shoot at the attacking tigers, but they became non-existent ghosts. Immediately, everyone rushed to their cars, rushing home to arrange for their treatment first, and then to see what they would do after that, because it is dangerous, and their enemy is a fast, malignant force that knows its goal. The return of the defeated. When they returned as soon as they could help themselves by bringing some first aid to save themselves and their friends, some of them took the rest to the city to receive the necessary treatment in the hospital and stayed there for not long. Meeting of the victors. In the middle of the jungle, the victors met with their leader, Niban. "Great work and successful attack. We have enriched them and taught them a harsh lesson that they may understand." Then he walked among them and climbed on a big rock and said, "These people must understand that the earth was not created for them alone, and that they must respect the lives of others. And we are not used to them, but they are the aggressors. My friends, we will not leave the forest where we were born and lived, the most beautiful days of our lives, and death in this forest is better and more honorable than getting out of it. And publicly, then, we should prepare for an upcoming battle that will be fiercer than the previous one. They will come to us ready armed to them. We have revenge. Their goal is known. It is killing us, and our goal is known, which is to defend ourselves with all strength. They have weapons, and we have the land, determination, and faith. Niban said these words and then ordered his followers to take their hideouts and places until their enemies returned and another battle would take place. Return of the wounded. "Here we are. We are back," said a stranger. "Yes, we are back and we will take revenge on them," the strongest revenge said by a third stranger. Zach: "It was a bitter experience. Please don't tell us about our goal. The money we're going to make from this forest is worth challenging." William: "Yes, we have to equip ourselves. We've got more weapons. We have plenty of bullets." One of the strangers: "We will crush them this time and we will not leave anyone alive." William: "We're going to sleep today and then start planning for a massive battle." Everyone: "Yes, yes." The owners of the land were no less prepared and enthusiastic than their enemies because defending the land requires determination and determination. The owners of the land turned their determination into ambushes, traps, and hideouts, and then a genius idea appeared to them that would cost them effort but whose results were enormous. The best way to defend is to attack. Morning fell on the motorized strangers with their bodies awake, and they woke up looking for their breakfast, their weapons, and their ammunition cabinets. Then they gathered to get out of the house, but they found the surprise. The door of the house is closed and difficult to open, and it is clear that it is closed from the outside. And strangers were amazed at what was happening. They tried to break down the door, but they were horrified by the smell of smoke that started to reach the inside of the house and then started to fill the place, making it impossible to breathe well with it. The reason for this is that the owners of the land cooperated and collected the branches of trees and the leaves of dry plants and blocked the door with them after tying the door handle to the ropes and then setting fire to these branches and leaves, which was a huge fire. And things get even more dangerous. If the fire reaches the inside, the result will be horrific because it will reach the ammunition, which threatens a severe explosion. And here the strangers tried to open this door with all the force they couldn't and tried to open the windows, but they were also blocked with iron rods, and so it was designed. So there's no escape but to break this door at all costs, even if this door cooperates with the owners of the land. And it took almost the hours of the day to get rid of the effects of this hostile act, so they extinguished the fire after difficulty. What complicated the matter was that they did not carry fire extinguishers with them in the house. They suffered a lot from the smoke that flooded the whole house, and after a long effort and continuous work, everyone threw at the end of the day epilepsy, and none of them uttered a word. And only one of them came to mind one question for which he could not find an answer. What brought us here? From these creatures that we face, they are hostile to us, and they deal with us with extreme indulgence. Is it really worth all these sacrifices? Our lives are in real danger. These creatures are not naive. They treat us with hostility, they are cooperative, and they are really dangerous. Some of them had in mind to withdraw from this losing battle, leaving their colleagues to face their fate alone. And if fate saved them once and then once, the third time they would not have survived and would perish if they stayed in this wild forest amidst these fierce creatures. Each individual kept his thoughts inside for fear that others would call him cowardice. They stayed like this epilepsy until the end of the night, and then they started to get up one by one to wash each individual, and then they sat silently wandering, their eyes open and their tongues not talking. Some of them drank tea and some grind a pipe, waiting for each of them to gather his health to see and decide what to do after they returned from the journey of death to life. Separation of forces. In the morning, everyone got up looking where their friend Brooke was, and they found him outside the house preparing his car and putting his luggage and cigarette in his mouth, not talking. William: "Where are you going, Brooke?" Brooke: "He doesn't answer." William: "And everyone gathered around him, Brooke. I ask you where to go." Brooke: "Here's what I mean." William: Come on, Brooke. Don't be a coward. You're dividing our power. Brooke, being a coward is better for me than being stupid fighting creatures I don't know for a handful of dollars. Brooke continued to tie up his luggage as he said, "We sacrifice our lives for money. We are eaten by predators and we don't care. Will the money benefit me if I die?" Zach, Brooke, we're going to eliminate these animals in a short time and then enjoy the money together. Imagine Brooke limiting the building to hundreds of hectares and you. Brooke interrupted him. "You mean my grave if there is anything left of me to be buried? Coincidence alone has made me alive so far, and it's possible and even certain that we will lose each other if we don't lose our lives completely. Then he enjoys the money from the one who stays alive, or maybe no one will enjoy it if we all die. Because we're going to be in a world of oblivion." Brooke, after everyone's silence, "I don't know if I'll see you again or not, but if there's anyone left of you, I hope to see him. Until next time." Brooke got into his car and set off in the direction of the road that was dozens of leagues away from the forest. Everyone stood in amazement with their heads down, and some sat outside the house in complacency and disappointment as Zach and William went inside. 2 men stayed outside the house, so their number became 4. As for Han, the 2 men looked at each other as if they had agreed with their own eyes on what they were going to do. Then they jumped out of their place standing and each took his rifle and a number of bullet lockers and got into their car rushing towards the forest. Zach and William didn't know about the 2 men until after hearing the sound of the car's engine, and in vain they tried to realize them to no avail. And strangely enough, they didn't catch up with them because of the extreme fatigue that hit them. There was a period of silence on the 2 men in the house, and then they heard the sound of gunshots coming in, and it was heavy and sporadical. The shooting lasted for a while, and then they were able to distinguish that the one who shot the bullets is one person and not 2 people. Soon after, the sound of bullets fell silent and the 2 men waited for the news. Minutes later, William and Zach were surprised by something that threw them out of the house, so they ran outside to find one of the 2 men, his body and face stained with blood. It seemed that he lost one of his eyes, that he had bled a lot of his blood before reaching the house, and that his enemy had forced him to run despite his wounds. Despite Zach and William's constant attempts to save their colleague and stop the bleeding, these attempts have failed. And here he is with his soul, and before he takes his last breath, he grabbed them while he was on the ground and said one word to them, "Run away." Then he died. 2 remaining men. William and Zach buried their friend and then got into their car and set off deep into the forest until they found their 4th friend. After a long search, they found him, and it was horrible and horrible. They found him a body with no features, and only the remains of a shattered head remained. He was preyed upon and eliminated. Again, the 2 other men buried their friend's body parts. Time had passed by them, and darkness began to enter and cover the forest, and they had to walk from this place quickly. So he drove her to their car. Their clothes got completely dirty, and then William was in the car. But she didn't know, as if this dreaded engine also colluded with the landowners and disrupted their start. Zach looked at William as he tried to start the engine in vain and said, "Don't say this to heaven." And here William put his hand on the steering wheel of the car and then started hitting the steering wheel as if he had despaired of his life and collapsed completely. The 2 friends were guided by what nature and circumstances imposed on them. They got out of their car to hurry to the house, got down, and started running toward the road. The end. But what they missed was that these animals, especially predators, go out hunting at night, and this is what was not taken into account. They run, then they rest, then they continue running, and here's the light of the house in sight. Then if a black cheetah pounces on Zach to prey on him and falls him to the ground in vain, William tries to save him, but the cheetahs multiply on him, and William has no trick to save his friend, so he releases his legs to the wind to reach his house, and then he enters in a hurry and closes the door, terrified, and his chest rises and falls from tiredness and horror, and then pushes a large table behind the door to seal its closure. William throws himself on a chair and then rushes to the water and pours on his head and body to wash off this dirt, and dirt stuck to him. William stayed all night trembling in horror from what he saw until sleep overwhelmed him, so he slept on his chair. And if the door opens as if William didn't close it, then leader Niban enters, and anger appears on his terrifying face. Nipan advances toward William, who seems paralyzed and unable to defend himself, as if he were waiting for the end, when Nipan, the leader, pounces on him. Niban arrived at William's face. Then he grimaced his fangs, and a grazing protrusion appeared, and here William closed his eyes, and he would die after a fraction of a second. But he woke up after discovering this terrifying nightmare. William came groping his body, whether he was alive or dead, and rushed to the door to make sure it was closed. Then he threw himself on the chair again, thinking about what he was going to do. William lost all his friends and aides in a jiffy, lost his closest friend in front of his eyes, and couldn't save him from the claws of hungry cheetahs. And he's talking to himself. "You've lost all your tools, William. I'm still insisting on staying here. Are you going to fight alone? That's crazy. So there's no escaping running out of this place to survive yourself and then never come back here. But will they let you run away? They're waiting for you outside, expecting you to go out at any time, and your fate will inevitably be like Zach's. Oh my God, what can I do?" After a long thought, William came and packed his belongings and carried his rifle, in which only 2 bullets remained that were not enough for a battle with a bird. He started to remove what was behind the door little by little, and then opened the door very slowly and sneaked slowly for fear of making a sound outside where there was no car or means of transportation. So he has to walk a long way to get out of the forest and then ride any car that throws him to where he is safe and surviving. As soon as he got to this road, a kilometer before this road, the tragedy that took William's heart. He found himself surrounded by those who would not have mercy on him with the owners of the forest, a clique of tigers, leopards, elephants, hyenas, wild dogs, even animals that did not eat meat gathered to watch and heal in this human being when it was eaten by their fellow avengers. And from these deer and antelopes, other than the monkeys who started screaming at the branches of trees in joy of this last prey, and here they are, about to celebrate the great victory. And no one knows what has been in his mind except God, that he is really in a situation that no sane person wishes for himself or even for his enemy. William stood in his place, looking at this circle that was gradually tightening on him, and thought of committing suicide with his rifle to save himself from rupture and pain if these savages decided to prey on him. Then he put his rifle, pointing its barrel at his chin, and put his hand on the trigger. And now he has put himself between 2 things, both of which end in his death. So he has to choose between death by bullets or death on the claws of these non-pet creatures. Before firing the bullet of mercy, he heard a roar coming from outside the circle, and William was amazed when all the voices were silenced, and even more astonished when he found the animals retreating in respect for the one coming from behind, walking in confident steps among his friends and congregation. Leader Niban approached William, staring into his eyes, and how much William trembled at the sight of his protruding fangs. Apparently, this leader was the one who would open the table. Yes, the leader will start first, and then the rest will complete the table after him. What a respect. Indeed, a world that has its rules and laws that are respected. And here Niban did not pounce on William and came out of William's nose. The exhalation of salvation and blood ran through his veins after he froze, and then Niban went to his parish and told them, "Let him go on his own way." One of the tigers said, "O leader, what do you say? We leave him. How do we leave him? He came to us as hostile and he injured a number of us along with his companions." One of the hyenas said, "Let's tear his flesh and crush his bones." And here Nippon was looking at William, and then he told them, "No, we let him go." One of the tigers, "We cannot let him go peacefully." And here chaos prevails and voices rise. Then the tiger comes forward in denunciation. "And why not prey on him as we have preyed on his colleagues? They killed our cubs." Animals, "Yes, boss. Why don't we prey on him? They killed us and occupied our land." And here and there is a roar in the silence of everyone, said Nibbon, "because we're not human." Then he looked at them with a sparkling eye, and everyone stepped back. And then he looked at William with a look from which William understood that it was a permit to cross from among them. And William began to move at a terrified pace. And William did not suspect that one of the animals would pounce on him at any time, but what reassured him a little was the power of Nibbon, that majestic leader. He kept walking among the animals until he reached the beginning of the road of cars, and stood in a shabby state and a trembling body, until a truck that William pointed to with an eager hand came and stopped immediately. William opened the door, jumped into it, and told the driver to go fast. As he trembled, the driver marveled at William's condition and asked him, "What's wrong with you, man? Is your father hated?" William didn't answer, and the driver came back and asked him again what happened to him. "Why don't you reply?" And here William pronounced without looking at the driver, "We are not human.